Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. In this video I'll be painting a tiger from start to finish. I just want to clarify that I'm not a professional by any means and painting's just something I enjoy doing in my free time. So this video isn't intended to be a tutorial and there won't be any solid instructions or pressure to follow along. I hope you find this video relaxing and enjoy the process of watching this painting gradually come together. As you can probably tell, I have already started this painting. I began with the basic sketch of the tiger and then covered the entire canvas in a very watered down orangey brown colour. It's actually my first time trying this technique myself. Usually I start off with just a white canvas, but I know a lot of artists use this technique and I wanted to see how easy it would be to blend the colours on top of an existing colour. In this painting, I want it to look like the tiger's walking towards us through mossy water. So I'm starting off with the darkest parts where the moss has parted because of the tiger's movements. And this doesn't have to be neat whatsoever. Most of it will be covered anyway by details later on. Here I've mixed in a green with the black to slightly lighten the water around the edges. Now I don't really know what I was thinking when I went in with this colour. Usually I would not go in with such a bright colour this early on into the painting. I can only assume I was just trying to map out the colour. Like I said in the intro, I'm not a professional and I'm still trying to figure out what techniques work for me specifically. I think this is only like my third painting in many years. So I'm still trying to figure it out. Now that the background is somewhat mapped out, I'm going to start with the darkest details in the tiger's face. That will be the nose, the eyes, and some of the stripes on the head. Again, this doesn't have to be neat, I'm just using it as a guide for where I'm putting the colours of the tiger. Most of it will be covered and I'll just use it as, again, a guide to then go back in and add more detail to the darker colours later on. I don't tend to paint animals, so I don't know what possessed me to start with one of the most detailed animals I can think of, but it was a challenge and I really enjoyed the process. Absolutely great view of the painting, I do apologise for that. Now we're on to probably the most exciting part, which is the tiger's face. I went in with 4 colours specifically. There was a darker orange, a lighter orange, a brown and a yellow. I'm not being particularly neat, and I'm not being careful to not cover any black because again I'm going to go in and redo all of the stripes at the end. A common problem I encounter when painting is the longer you look at your painting, the less it looks like what you're trying to paint. To try and counter this, I take regular breaks just to not look at it for 5 minutes or so, and then when you come back to it, you can fix the parts that you probably didn't notice before you stepped away. the more I looked at it, the more I really didn't like the black bits on the cheeks. I thought I'd made them far too big. So I'm covering most of them with white, and I'll go back in with the black to thicken them up slightly, but not as thick as they are here. I am also a perfectionist when it comes to my art, and I know people that can get a painting like this done in 5-6 hours. Unfortunately, I can't do that, and most of my paintings take about 60 to 70 hours, but hopefully with patience and practice I can shorten the time it takes me to finish a painting. I tend to paint landscapes, and the detail is what takes the most time. I think this painting took about 20 hours. Now I'm finished with the colours on the face, I'm going back in with a black to emphasise the stripes of the tiger, but I thought that black paint and a paintbrush wouldn't be as accurate and it would be neater to just use a pen, so that's what I'm using. A lot of the stripes and the details are very fine, and I knew I wouldn't get much accuracy and detail with a paintbrush. I've never looked closely at a tiger's whiskers before, but I was shocked to realise that they're all in straight lines. It did make it a lot easier to paint them. Side note, I don't know what that blue stuff in my hair is, and I just hope it's not paint. Knowing me, it's probably paint. Now I'm happy with the face, I'm going to start on the chest, and I'm using a green to show the reflections of the moss in the water. I think it turned out pretty good.
Oh yeah, it's all coming together.
I really struggled with this part specifically. I struggled to find a balance between the orange and the white and the grey to try and show the shadow in the water, but I think I achieved quite a nice blend in the end. So now that the base colours of the tiger are down, apart from that little bit to the right of the head that I missed, I will come back to that, I'm going in with black once again, cleaning up the edges of the water and creating some little details that I didn't before. I ended up absolutely hating this bit, so I did end up covering it, but that's okay. And that little cut there was because my phone died while I was recording, and you can see I have covered up the bit I said I didn't like, not very well, but again we can go in and cover that later. Right now just focusing on deepening the blacks of the water. Because it is mostly covered in moss, there's not a lot of light getting in. And then for some strange reason I start mixing blues and then change my mind. I was gonna try adding some detail to the water because I was really excited to make it pop, but then I realised I should probably get some of the stripes done first, which is what I'm doing here. And now for the bit I've been waiting for, adding the highlights to the surface of the water to make it look 3D and bring it to life. This will really help to show the movement of the tiger through the water, creating ripples, and the blue is also really watered down, just to make sure you can still see the details of the tiger through the water. I've never painted water like this, and because it's new to me, it's obviously not going to be perfect. I think it turned out pretty well. I really just trusted my gut and painted the blue where I thought the light would show the most. I didn't really like how this part turned out either. I ended up covering it all and redoing the tail and not putting as much highlights in the back, as that would be where the least amount of movement on the water would be. So I ended up leaving what I had already done to dry and coming back to it the next day. So at this point the whole canvas is dry and ready for the next layer of paint. And I also finally noticed that little gap that I'd missed before. I had no clue how I missed it up until now, but at least it's painted. Here I'm just adding some highlights to some of the stripes in the tiger's back, just to add a little bit more dimension. And I took a very fine tipped paint pen just to add some of the details to the top of the water, and I'll also use this a little bit later on to add the whiskers and some of the hairs in the ears. Here I'm starting to paint some of the moss that will be floating on top of the water that's been disturbed by the tiger's movement. This is probably one of the most time-consuming parts, and my hand did cramp up a few times. I had to take a lot of breaks. Not being overly careful with where I put them, kind of just incorporating it into the reflections of light off the top of the water wherever the ripples are. And obviously the tiger wouldn't get through all this mossy water without being covered in at least some moss. So I've put a few pieces on the tiger as well, on the face and the back. Again, not being too careful where I put them. Moss really doesn't follow any specific pattern, so I'm just dotting it around. You might have noticed earlier on I skipped the part where I put this darker green in the background. That's because I ended up covering it. I wasn't sure what technique I wanted to use for the background, and I ended up keeping most of it plain and putting the most detail around the edges of the tiger, just to keep all the focus there. Also, I knew that if I had used the same technique for the moss I did around the tiger, I probably would have been sat there painting until the next week because it was so time consuming. Here I start stippling around the edges in various shades of green. There was a light green, a sap green, and a colour called pistachio I used for the highlights. This was just to give the impression it was lots of little tiny pieces of moss. I also brought some of these green dots up to the black parts where the water is showing, just to show that there are some loose moss parts that were disturbed. Once I've gone round the entire edge of the focus point of the painting, I blend all of these different types of greens into the outer parts of the painting, just to bring it all together, make sure it doesn't look all one uniform colour. And that brings us to the end of this painting. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I'm so happy with how the painting turned out in the end. This was my first time ever recording a voiceover for a video, and I really hope it turned out okay. If you liked this video, please like and subscribe, it really does help me. And feel free to have a look at my other social medias, I post a lot more on there. Thank you again, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Bye!